look at FRQ 3, which is going to be visual analysis. Now, this is the FRQ, in my opinion, that is the easiest one to do because they're going to give you an image. This image is not going to be from the 250, but for the most part, it doesn't matter because you're using your visual analysis skills to look at that image or images and break it down. Elements, principles are going to be your best friends. So your elements of shape, form, color, value, space, line, and texture, and then your principles including things like contrast, emphasis, balance, proportion, scale, unity, variety, rhythm, pattern, movement. Maybe I have more, I don't remember. Look at the images and talk about what it's asking for you to do. Usually there's some additional questions for you to respond to related to the prompt, but this is where you get as many points as possible because, like I said, this is the easiest one. Spend only about 15 minutes on this because this is a short FRQ. You want to keep moving fast through these FRQs to the best of your ability. Never freeze, you got this. Just make sure that you are following the prompt. As always, really read the question and answer what it is asking. If it's talking about perspective and you're talking about color, you're not following the prompt. So always read the question carefully. My favorite thing to do, as always, is restating the questions as sentence starters. This helps us keep track of our task points and helps us stay focused on the prompt. You don't have to do this. It is slightly time wasting, but for the most part, people who use this tend to get higher points because they stay focused. So we're going to take a look at an example to see how visual FRQs can look, how to read them, and how to respond to this example. This example here is pulled from the 2024 AP Art History exam, so you can find on College Board a full breakdown of the points, etc., if you are interested. So when we are looking at this piece and this question, it says, the work shown is Tar Beach by Faith Ringgold, created in 1991 CE. Because this is not part of the 250, it's going to give you a good chunk of information. We have the title, we have the artist, we have the year here. Now, the fact that we have the artist, this looks a lot like Faith Ringgold's piece that we have in the 250. This is just some background contextual to kind of help us with some of the questions. Beyond that, we don't need to do any identification. Now, our first question here is 2 points. Describe at least 2 visual characteristics of the work. So anytime it says do 2 things, usually that's 2 points. And visual characteristics, nice and generic, you talk about the visuals. Easy, easy points. Next question. Using specific visual evidence, explain how the artist creates spatial depth. So spatial depth, as in a sense of space, that one's a little bit more specific. Usually it starts generic, visual characteristics, gets a little bit more specific to the piece. So in this case, it's spatial depth. Could be things like symmetrical balance. It could be about how the artist uses brush strokes or use of line or printing techniques. It's still broad, but a little bit more focused. Then it gets a little bit even more focused. Again, staying in that visual zone though. The next question says, using specific visual evidence, so what you see, explain how the work tells or communicates a story. So this, you need a little bit more background information in theory for it to be easy. So if you're like, oh, I know Faith Ringgold's piece, I know exactly how she talks about stories, boom, that point is really easy. If you're looking at it like, I have never seen an artwork that looks remotely like this before, just look at the piece. There's a lot of elements in there that can help tell the story of this piece just by looking at it. So again, it wants visual, it's just a little bit more specific. The last point, using specific visual or contextual evidence, explain why Tar Beach deviates from early artistic traditions in the 20th century. Now, again, we're getting more specific, and in this case, we have visual or contextual. Usually with that last question, they're trying to lock into like a broader sense of time, traditions, changes. It kind of hits almost that tradition change FRQ style just in one question. Just pay attention to what it is asking you for each question because it is very different per FRQ. So to break down how to answer that, I've provided a bigger image so that we can see while we're writing. To break down the answers, first 2 points, tasks 1 and 2, are describing at least 2 visual characteristics of the work. So for me, when I look at visual characteristics, easiest things to talk about: color, balance, composition, and space. Balance is easy for me because I can take a look, cut it in half, go, okay, it's symmetry, asymmetry, radial, or maybe it flattens space so much that the balance is super chaotic. No matter what, balance is easy to talk about. Color, I could just list colors that I see. That's a visual characteristic. Composition, you can follow our format of breaking down a composition to talk about how it's organized. So we've done a lot of practice with that, so that one might be easy. And space, identifying the positive and negative space. So easy task points, but you can do literally whatever you're most comfortable with. But again, think elements, think principles, anything you can see. So for example, I wrote one visual characteristic is the use of white text on the deep blue sky. So I have color as well as subject matter in that one. A second characteristic is the use of the quilted fabric texture in which the skyscape and people are painted. So I'm mentioning texture and what that texture is, not just that it has some, saying specifically what it has. And then I'm mentioning a skyscape, so I get a sense of the subject and that there are people as well as paint. So I'm covering a lot of my bases, but I'm moving real quick through it. I use the one visual characteristic and second visual characteristic as my sentence starters. Other ideas that are from College Board that were accepted for points: brightly colored, group of figures seated at a table, figures sleeping or lying down, figures flying in the sky, work depicts a city, flowered border, clothing is detailed, detailed food and drink objects on the table, large bridge dominates the left, middle, and background of the image. So visual characteristic, they accept a lot. As long as you're talking about what you see specific enough, not that it just has color, or it has texture, or it has composition, but you're saying what colors, what composition. You know, you be specific enough, but you don't have to take a lot of time on this. Get it done, use what you see, move on. Easy 2 points. We love freebies, right? The next point, using specific visual evidence, explain how the artist creates spatial depth. So if you're like, whoa, spatial depth, or even you don't know how to pronounce it, or you're like, what is spatial depth? You can see depth. I love a lisp, right? It's really helpful right now. And understand, okay, depth means space. So I need to talk about space. So I'm looking at the image again, and I am focusing in on that sense of depth. Again, this question is going to be specific to the piece, but just a little bit more specific than our last question. So I said the artist uses spatial depth, there's my sentence starter, by overlapping the buildings and bridge so the objects towards the bottom of the composition feel closer and the objects towards the top feel further away. That's a little overkill, but I am making sure for myself that I am confident that I have all the information. I could have just said by overlapping buildings. That would have gotten the point. And you can see that the simple stuff definitely works. Diagonal lines suggests perspective. Upturned roof gives a sense of tipped perspective. Closer objects are bigger. Foreground are larger. Farther away is smaller. Any of those kind of concepts works just as well. 1 point, easy if you know depth enough, but again, use your eyes. The visual FRQ is all about what you can see. So look at the image, don't ignore her. Next point, using specific visual evidence, explain how the work tells or communicates a story. So again, this is a little bit more specific. Make sure you're reading what the prompt wants. In this case, it's about a story. So I said the artwork communicates a story through the use of text in the piece. I knew enough about Ringgold to then say Ringgold tells narratives in small segments of written story, almost like a picture book or poem. So I added a little bit more because I didn't feel confident enough just saying that there is text. To get the point, all I had to put is written text. Boom. That's a point. I love it. Nice, easy points for this. You could talk about the use of a continuous narrative. Figures are depicted multiple times in different scenes. You can talk about animated gestures to indicate actions. Image is detailed and it encourages viewer to create meaning. Variety of activities placed. They had a lot of range on what they were looking for on this one. But my easiest one, I was like, there's text there. That text tells a story. Then our final point here, this is going to be the broadest, more contextual side of the visual FRQ. Usually tradition change, but not always, so always read. Using specific visual or contextual evidence, explain why Tar Beach deviates from early artistic traditions in the 20th century. That means 1900s. So I don't want to talk about like the Renaissance because that is nothing to do with what the question's asking, right? 20th century, 1900s. So again, this one's more contextual, but I can still look at the image and kind of guess the meaning. You put on your imaginary beret, you pretend you're in an art museum, and you're like, yes, I'm going to sound smart right now. And then you yap. So I said that the artwork deviates from early traditions because of the focus on Black narrative empowerment. So I'm using contextual evidence in here. In her art, Ringgold tells the story of fictional Black characters doing fantastical things or rewriting history to change the narrative of exclusion into one of inclusion. So that I knew Ringgold enough to confidently talk about her purpose in her work. In general, this piece, using Black characters and talking about the Black perspective is a huge shift. So that's the easiest one. But you could talk about the quilted texture is a huge deviation because it's breaking that tradition of oil on canvas, even into the abstraction and heavy stylization of the 1900s. There's a lot of different directions you can go. If you want to see more detailed responses, you can, again, go to the College Board website. But that's a visual FRQ. So easiest FRQ to fake your way through if you're like not feeling it, especially when you first start the FRQ and you're like, oh my God, I'm scared. Go to the visual, feel a little bit more confident, build up that confidence and just lock it in, get those easier points. And I know I'm hyping up how easy it is, but really if you know your elements, you know your principles, you can crush this one. So I know you guys can do it. Visual FRQ, use the image to help you answer the prompt. Good luck, guys, and good job on all your visual FRQs.